Ladies and gentlemen, we have made it. It is the time for the NCAA tournament. Hi, I'm Austin Berkland from Illinicast, part of the Armchair Illini, and we are proud to have Alex come on the show as my co-host from Armchair Illini. How's it going, Alex?
Going well, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
It is a blast to have you on. It's a great time of the year. Let's just go over this season, Alex. What were your what disappointed you most about the season, and what impressed you most about the season for the Illini?
I think all things considered, it was a very successful season. When you think about how many new pieces came in with this offseason and how young this team was going in, I think we all expected it to take a little bit of time. And the fact that they did show that they were a little bit ahead of schedule, if you look at those games against Oregon, you look at those games against Indiana, where they completely blew teams out of the water. I think that gave a lot of Illini fans a little bit of false hope. And I think that kind of erased those worries that, hey, this is a really young team. It's going to take some time for them to gel. And on top of that, I think those lows that they had, you think about the Duke game, you think about losing versus USC. Those are very bitter moments that really took away from what was a pretty successful season. I think the Indiana game and the Oregon game kind of gave a lot of fans some false hope that, hey, this team is the national contending. They're going to win the Big Ten, et cetera. Their Final Four great. I think a lot of that hype got blown out of proportion. And I don't think that was ever the case with this team. This team's very talented, but national championship, it was never the expectation for this year. It was always about next year. That's a different story now because a lot of this roster probably won't be here next year, given how well they're grading out on the NBA draft. But I do think it was a very successful season. But the most disappointing thing was some of those, major lows. The Duke game, losing by 20 points at Wisconsin, the Big Ten tournament loss versus Maryland, where you weren't even competitive. Those are really probably the most disappointing parts, but I don't think they were unexpected in the grand scheme of things.
I was really hoping whenever I looked at what the Illini's record was against other NCAA tournament teams that I would get like something a direction like, man, this is way more optimistic, or man, maybe I should be a little bit more pessimistic when I'm filling out the bracket and where Illinois goes. Do you know where they finished, Alex, against other tournament teams?
So off the top of my head, because I wrote this article about yesterday, they're 8-10, I believe, off the top of my head against well-known opponents. Um,
They they were 8-8 against NCAA tournament foes.
which
That
is
is
good.
500. Like it seems pretty good, and then you look at the meat on the bone still, where you think, man, they could have had a little bit more. They could have had a little bit more if Tomislav didn't get injured, if injured and sick, if Morez Johnson didn't get injured as well. There was so many potentially great things that could have happened in terms of seed wise, but then you look at the Illini seed, in reality, it's still a 6 seed. It's not like this is a team just scraping by to make the NCAA tournament. They're not playing in Dayton tonight or tomorrow night just to get into the field of 64. So that is a positive in and of itself with how young this team is. And I know you don't get to really embrace the growth of the team, which is the sucky part of this new experiment of the one and done and NIL culture of college basketball. You wish you would have like just one more year of Kasparis, one more year Will Riley, and really see what this could do. But that's just the way of college basketball, Alex.
Yeah, definitely. I think probably another insult to the injury is the fact that Kasparis isn't going to be on this roster next year. Will Riley's not going to be on this roster next year. There's not much continuity going forward. But I do think there is some. Kylan Boswell probably will be back. Avicic, the plan was always to be a 2-year guy. Morez Johnson, I think he's shown that he really likes it at Illinois, and for now, hopefully he stays. And you have Trey White. This is his third school in 3 years. I think he wants to stay. I don't think he wants to go to a fourth school in 4 years. So there is some continuity, but those top end guys, KJ, Will Riley, you're gonna have to replace some star power once again, and that could be a little bit frustrating.
It is a blessing of how well Trey White has played at the end of the year, where you see the vision of Brad Underwood, you see the vision of Trey White on this roster in the future. And it's not like he was bad at the end of the year. If he was bad at the end of the year, you were thinking, yep, that's a definite transfer. He doesn't fit with the culture that Brad Underwood is building. I think he is a true building block of this team next year with just his scoring ability. His defense is still pretty great. His athleticism is something that you need in the Big Ten. I am excited about the future with Trey White next year.
Yeah, I agree. And I think having guys that were on this year totally helps. Terrence Shannon wasn't Terrence Shannon Jr. the first year that he was there. You know, Coleman Hawkins steadily got better and better each year. So I think continuity is huge. We obviously won't see it too much in this day and age of transfer portal, NIL, what have you. But continuity is huge. And I think each time that you look at some of the major stars in Illinois history, they've gotten better with each offseason. And I do think that development has been a strong suit of this program because each offseason guys get better. You don't see much stagnation. Dre Gibbs Lawhorn, is the probably the only example from this, but he did get better. It's not that he, regressed or anything like that. Obviously some fans wanted to see him more, but he did get better in one offseason. And I think that Trey White, Kylan Boswell, same thing. You can see some of those jumps in second years, being in the program, getting used to things.
This is the Illinicast. If you're just joining us, part of the Armchair Illini Network. And Alex, you are part of the Armchair Illini Network. What you got cooking for the NCAA tournament right now?
Honestly, we got a good amount of stuff. It's tough for me personally because I just finished, a couple weeks of nights, so I'm still trying to recalibrate to life. But my good friend Kirkland's working hard. We're trying to provide as much written content for y'all as possible. My good friend RJ, who's our graphic designer, has done an amazing job. Super talented young man. We got some nice things cooking, and hopefully some more to come. And stay tuned, and hopefully the Illinicast is up and running as well.
Absolutely. You look at this Big Ten tournament, you had the amazing win against Iowa, 100 plus points in it for Ann McCaffrey's Iowa career. And then you had the Maryland game where you looked just out toughed, you looked out coached, you looked just discombobulated with the turnovers, and all of a sudden it looks like a repeat of the Duke game. What are your thoughts on how the Big Ten tournament lasted for the Illini, and does that make you nervous for what could happen on Friday and on Sunday potentially?
I think the Maryland game really confirmed to me, what a bad matchup for Illinois is. You look at Derek Queen, you look at Julian Reese, you look at a very old perimeter in Selton Miguel, longer, tougher downhill guards, Jacoby Gillespie. That's just not a good recipe for a team like Illinois. And I think you saw the same thing against Cooper Flag and Duke. It's just a really bad matchup. Obviously, Illinois has Ivisic, they have Johnson Jr., but I think they struggle against some more athletic big guys that could play at the same time. Even despite Ivisic and Johnson showing the ability to play together. So I think it really just confirmed how bad a matchup that is. And luckily for Illinois, they were able to avoid that. I think with the games that they have coming up in the NCAA tournament, the way that they lost did stink, but I also think that it was probably a blessing in disguise for Illinois to get some time off and, kind of regain themselves before, heading into the tournament. Because let's say they played 2, 3 more games, I'm not sure how Ivicic's conditioning would hold up, So I think it was a blessing in disguise for them to maybe just get out a little bit early, and recalibrate, so to speak. Obviously, you hate to see them get clobbered, but I think there could be some positives from it, and they were able to avoid that kind of matchup in March.
I mean, Illinois craves practice time, especially a young roster. The last time they had some practice time, they reeled off a 4-game win streak. After that Duke game, they finally had time to practice. They beat Iowa. They beat Michigan. They beat Purdue. Michigan, a team that won the Big Ten tournament. And then they beat Iowa once again in the Big Ten tournament. That's after some time of practice. And I think this team, with how young they are, um, they need that general direction. The AAU style of schedule that Illinois had with during the middle of the season, right before that Duke game, was chaotic. There was not enough time to really get a game plan going. There wasn't enough time to repeat those fundamentals that are vital for young players to learn. And whenever they did have practice, that time to reestablish some things, that's when Illinois was successful. And I think now is that time for Illinois to really grasp onto that against a team like Texas or a game like Xavier. It's going to be nice to see this team with some rest and, of course, with some practice.
Yeah, agreed. I think the more practice that they get, the better, and I think it helps them add some wrinkles as they head into March. They made some very slight adjustments heading into that first game against Iowa, and this is the chance for them to basically add some more and make themselves a little bit more versatile and a little bit more cohesive.
The first four is going on, but Texas and Xavier play tomorrow. You look at Texas, they finished third to last in the SEC, just barely making it in, but they were one of the 14 record setting teams to be a part of the NCAA tournament field from the SEC, of course, led by freshman Trey Johnson with 19 points per game. But then you look at Xavier, they're pretty hot at the moment after only losing one game since that game against Providence. They won 91-82. They lost to Marquette 89-87 in the Big East tournament. They finished right behind Marquette in the Big East standings. They are led by Zach Freemantle at 17 points per game. But both teams, they average 78 points per game, which is astounding. And then Xavier a little bit better on defense, allowing 70.9 points per game compared to Texas's 72.2. What matchup do you like most out of these two teams on what you have seen from different analysts or your own eyes?
Yeah, I wrote this, I believe, last night in terms of who I would rather play in the NCAA tournament. My answer is Xavier. Xavier, looking at their little win streak, you said that they're hot, but they beat Providence twice. They beat Butler twice, both sub 500 teams. And then they beat Seton Hall, the worst team in the Big Ten. So that's 5 games right there. They had an impressive win against Creighton at home, won by 20. But other than that, I mean, you beat Providence twice, who was a terrible team, Butler twice. That's not overly impressive. It's like saying if we beat Minnesota twice and beat Washington, not many people would be that impressed with that. I do think Xavier poses some threats. Sean Miller is an experienced coach. He's played in March. He's got some dudes on there, particularly Ryan Conwell, fifth-year guy from Indiana State, who's a really, 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 really good shooter. And Fremantle's a pretty good player as well. But outside of that, there's not much that worries me. There's no pros on the team, and they got a pretty mediocre backcourt, and they don't have much depth up front. So Texas, I know the record was 6-12 in the SEC, but they were 7-10 in quadrant one games. That's impressive. Illinois was 8-10 in those quadrant one games, so pretty similar to what Texas was. And they got a pro. They got a lottery pick in Trey Johnson. They got some athletic bigs in Arthur Kaluma, Caden Shedrick. So I think there can be some problems with Texas despite the record. And they're battle tested. I mean, 7-10 in quadrant one games. Xavier's 1-9 in those games. It's a very, very stark difference. So I would much rather play Xavier because of all the reasons that I just stated.
Yeah, and I mean, the Big East was not really the Big East of your older brothers or father's
The Big East.
generation. It is not a bear anymore. Yes, St. John's is a really, really good team. Rick Pitino has them coached up, but this UConn team in the Big East wasn't the Dan Hurley teams of the last couple of years. They were 14-6 in conference play. So if Xavier finds a way to beat Texas in the first four. I am really liking this path that the Illini have to at least a second weekend. I'm going to pull this graphic up here over us. You look at Houston and SIUE, Gonzaga, Georgia, Clemson, Milwaukee, Purdue, High Point, Illinois, of course, facing that winner of Texas Xavier, and then Kentucky takes on Troy, and we would take the winner of that if Illinois were to win against Texas and Xavier. I think this path to a second weekend to a potential matchup against Tennessee is awesome. And then you're looking at a matchup against Houston in the Elite Eight, potentially. I think Illinois' bracket is not this bracket of death that some other quadrants are. So I cannot be more happy with the draw that the Illini had.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you think about how many people thought we were going to be a 7 seed, and you think of maybe going up against an Alabama in the second round, or a St. John's, or Texas A&M, things like that. I think we really, really got lucky with the 6 seed. Obviously, playing Xavier or Texas is going to be a tough one, but at the same time, I do think that Illinois should be favored in whoever they play. And then that second round opponent, when you talk about Kentucky, they're a little banged up. They just lost Jackson Robinson, one of their main shooters for the season. And I think Lamont Butler, I'm not sure if he's 100% healthy. That's their point guard. So I think, to be honest, they're not a defensive team either. Illinois can take advantage of that. So I think the table's set for them to make that Sweet 16. And then you think about it too, they almost beat Tennessee. They probably should have won that game. So they got as favorable a matchup as you could have hoped for.
And geography wise, a pretty favorable matchup as well, with going from Milwaukee to Indianapolis en route to the Final Four. I know Big Blue will travel well to Milwaukee. They travel everywhere in the NCAA tournament really well, but to have that home court advantage potentially against a team like Kentucky, being so close to Chicago and all these alumni from the city of Chicago coming up to Milwaukee for this first weekend, I think it's going to be a raucous environment for the Illini, and there is no excuse this time around. Like, the game against Loyola, it was a Sunday game at 11 a.m. I really don't think there's any excuse for the lack of energy that this crowd will bring, and what this Illini team is going to be facing, because they're facing 8:45 p.m. Tomorrow Central Time, on Friday, pardon me, against whoever they play, and that's going to be against a team with tired legs. So I think this team is getting set up pretty well in terms of not only schedule but location and what teams are in this quad.
No, 100% agree. And then I know Sonny just mentioned we're capable of
I
beating
will
out
put
X
that
and
up
O.
there.
These are 1-day preps. So a lot of X and O's go out the window. It basically gets to, you know, what do you do, and can you do it well? And can you show up? Look back at the Loyola game. You know, the 1-day preps are very, very hard. And I think that's why Brad Underwood teams were pretty hard to go up against when he was at SFA, because they play a very weird style. And 1-day preps against that denied defense, very difficult.
Yeah, I think some of the keys for the Illini in this NCAA tournament is, number one, get KJ going. He's had a rough few weeks recently, and I think you need to just show him game tape of him succeeding against some European pros. Give him some confidence. Really showcase what he did against the likes of Oregon, and really just get himself in a mental space where he can succeed. And number two, I think Morez Johnson, just being that physical presence down low, keeping him out of foul trouble. And then the third is Tomislav Ivisic. What physicality will he bring? And what offensively is he going to bring? Is he just going to be chucking if he sees even a half space from behind the 3-point line? Or is he actually going to play within the sense of this offense that Brad Underwood has? So I think those are my big three keys here. And then maybe a fourth, if I want to throw one in, is Will Riley. The minutes that he plays are going to be vital for this team, because yes, he is a thin guy. Yes, he doesn't have the physicality, but the height that he has, the shot making ability, the way that he can drive to the lane with his finesse is amazing. So I think the freshmen and the newbies really showcasing what they can do is going to be vital. We've seen the Kentuckies of past with John Calipari when they have those young guys. They wilted in the moment, and what Illinois needs to do is just try to figure out how the how you can get the best KJ, how you can get the best Will Riley, and how you can get the best Morez and Thomas Loft all at the same time. Yes, it's a tough task, but I think it can be done with the talent that this Illini group has.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing will be the bench, looking at Hummerkaus, DGL, one of those guys has to have that game. You look at last year, Dane Danger saved some games, so DGL hit some big threes against Morehead State first round. They were kind of struggling. He hit some big, I think it was two big threes. So is Hummerkaus going to have that kind of game? Is DGL going to have that kind of game? That's going to be the key. If those guys don't show up, if Hummerkaus has 5 points and one rebound, it's not going to cut it, and then they're probably going to lose if he shows up like that. So I think I'm really looking forward to seeing if the bench can step up.
And plus, Trey White and Kylan Boswell, they've been in these situations before in college basketball. Kylan has been in the NCAA tournament in deeper runs with Arizona, really bring that leadership there. And I know he's done a great job in the past at doing that recently outside of the Maryland game. But he is still the leader of this team. And I think he showcased that through when after the Duke game and that winning streak that the Illini had. So I think Kylan, if he stays within himself, doesn't panic and doesn't just jack up shots, I think he can be a great way that the Illini sneak out a victory, maybe against the likes of a Kentucky team that is also gelling in a new way because of they have a new coach, they have a new system and everything. I know it's late in the year, but all these teams are still learning because of the youth and the inexperience together.
Yeah, definitely. Man, I just hope we can make that Sweet 16. It'll be huge.
I think we can. I like. Let me pull that bracket back up because, again, this isn't anything too outrageous. Um, you have Illinois, Texas, Kentucky, Troy, and then there's a possibility that UCLA could pull the upset over Tennessee. UCLA is a pretty talented team, and Illinois has beat UCLA in the past. There's going to be an upset or two in every single bracket or quadrant per se. It's just, can Illinois take advantage of those upsets whenever they do come? If they can't, it will be pretty sad if there's a number 7 seed or a number 9 seed in the Final Four from the Midwest, and Illinois just didn't take advantage of those upsets.
Yeah. I mean, in an ideal world, Troy beats Kentucky, right? And Xavier beats Texas, and I think that would be our ideal scenario.
I mean, Illinois caught a break last year with the
Game.
upset of BYU with Duquesne. I mean, that was a matchup that I was very happy about because I know BYU can shoot the lights out last year, and this is all what March is. March is about playing the best basketball that you possibly can and embracing the breaks you get along the way. That's the perfect formula for how teams that aren't a number 1 seed. Have the ability to move on to a second round, to a Final Four. We've seen it time and time again, a team getting hot at the right moment. And I really hope after that Maryland game that the confidence wasn't shaken where Maryland beats Illinois twice in this first round game against Texas or Xavier.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So, what is your prediction for this Illini group at the end of this March Madness? Where do they go? I know they've been Jekyll and Hyde, but are you picking the Jekyll or are you picking the Hyde in this group?
Honestly, I anytime that I've made a pretty significant prediction for Illinois, it ends up kind of exploding. So I'm going to refrain from making a prediction, but I think the table is set for them to make a Sweet 16. But I'm not sure. I'm going to leave it at that.
I am going to be the optimist here. I think Illinois will make an Elite Eight. I think this team will just propel themselves in a way that they haven't before because of the practice time they've had, the embarrassment that they had against Maryland. I think there's enough leadership in Trey White and Kylan Boswell to push Illinois through. I think the freshman talent is there. It's just all about putting it together, and this draw could not have been a more of a blessing for the Illini. This Kentucky team is beat up. This Illini team can beat Texas. They can beat Xavier. And then I think down the line of the bottom half of this bracket, like I said, UCLA and Tennessee are your big threats, and I think Illinois can beat both of them. They had a big lead against Tennessee at State Farm Center, and I think they want that revenge. And it's tough to beat a team twice in college basketball. And then on the top half of the bracket, I think Houston's just way too deep and way too physical to overcome. They are like Maryland on steroids down there in Texas, just with the physicality that they bring. So I think Houston would just bully ball Illinois like they've seen against Duke and like they've seen against Maryland. But I think an Elite Eight season back to back with the newbies on this team would be a unbelievable success for the Illini, and I don't think that's anything to hang their hat on if you're an Illini fan.
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to the first game, whether they play Xavier, whether they play Texas. Um, I would not be shocked if they lose that game, just because it's everyone's first time really playing on that stage. It's Visic's first time. It's KJ's first time. It's Will Riley's first time. It's Marez Johnson's first time. Yeah, Trey White played with USC 2 years ago. Kylan, you know, he got upset in the first round, I think, 2 years ago versus Princeton when he was at Arizona. It's going to be about that first game and how they start that first game. If they fall into a hole, it's going to be really tough for them to kind of dig out of that. And I think that's certainly possible with Texas if they do end up playing them. With the way that Trey Johnson can light it up, with the way that Arthur Kaluma can kind of dominate out the glass and really take over athletically. So I think it's coming down to this first game. If they can get past this first game, I think they could easily beat whoever they play in the second round once they get a rhythm. And then it's game on once you hit the Sweet 16 because you get another week of prep. But playing whoever they play on a pretty short prep, I think that's going to be the biggest key for me this Friday.
Yeah, I think if Illinois does play Texas, I think you got to look at that Kentucky game as kind of the blueprint of the Illini. Texas won that game 82-78. They kind of limited Kentucky's offensive possessions in a way that Kentucky wasn't used to. So you got to just continue to make shots. You got to continue to offensive rebound and really make Texas defend you the entire stretch of the way. So I think that's a good barometer game of what Illinois might look like against Texas. Just got to make a few more shots and upend them. It's going to be some close games in there. This gaming with Texas and Xavier, it's a 2.5 point spread. It's going to be that kind of close spread as well. Whoever wins against the Illini, and there's some big time analysts picking the Illini to get upended in the first round. There's some big time analysts that have Illinois like me in the Elite Eight. I've never seen this kind of variance before with an Illini team. It's kind of fun, but also scary at the same time. But Alex, again, what's coming up on Armchair Illini for this tournament?
Yeah, for this tournament, I mean, to be honest with you, I hope it's not just a one and done, because that hinges a lot on what we're gonna have planned for everyone on armchairillini.com. Make sure you check it out. Make sure you keep subscribe to the Illinicast because you guys would be up and rolling the further we go in March. But I hope it's just not a one and done. We're gonna have articles up. We're gonna have a lot going on. So make sure you're tuned into us on social media as well.
Absolutely. The transfer portal is going to be bonkers no matter when Illinois is eliminated because there's going to be portal entries galore as these teams get eliminated in March. And Armchair Illini will be all over it with the best fits of the Illini and potentially some defections when Illinois does, in fact, have their season ended, whether that's in Indianapolis or Milwaukee or even further down the road. So Armchair Illini will be covering it. I will be covering it with Sonny on Illinicast, and we can't wait to see what the Illini do in March. And of course, spring football is going on in Kirkland, has got you nailed down for spring football content with Brett Bielema building up his repertoire of recruits, and Kirkland's covering that as well. So be on the lookout for all Armchair Illini content on armchairillini.com and all the social channels. And then we'll be here on YouTube on Illinicast. Alex, thank you again for joining me, and looking forward to talking to you more as this tournament progresses.
Appreciate it, man. Appreciate you having me.
And this has been the Illini Cast. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. ILL.